Daniel Harper was covered in grease and sweat when the soldiers came for him. He was lying on his back beneath the secondary coolant system of the Resolute, trying to fix a leak that had been bothering him for 3 days. The ship was old, one of Earth's first long-range diplomatic vessels, and it complained constantly. Daniel did not mind. He liked fixing things. It gave him something to do while the politicians above him talked in circles with the aliens. The boots appeared first. 4 pairs of them, silver and polished, standing in a perfect line beside his workstation. Daniel slid out from under the machinery and looked up at the Volante guards towering over him. They were tall. All Volante were tall. 7 feet at least, with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the engine room. Each of them had 4 arms folded across their chest, and their eyes were solid black, like polished stones. They wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than built, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy Daniel did not understand. "Daniel Harper," one of them said. It was not a question. Daniel wiped his hands on his work pants and stood up slowly. "That's me. You will come with us. The Queen has summoned you." Daniel blinked. He looked around the engine room as if someone might jump out and tell him this was a joke. No one did. "The Queen," he repeated. "Queen Sivalith, the ruler of 47 star systems. That Queen. There's only one Queen, right?" Daniel scratched the back of his head. "Can I ask why?" "No." The guards turned and began walking toward the exit. Daniel stood there for a moment, then grabbed his jacket and followed them. He had learned quickly that the Volante did not explain themselves to humans. They gave orders, and they expected those orders to be followed. 20 minutes later, Daniel found himself standing in a shuttle that moved faster than anything Earth had ever built. Beside him sat Captain Laura Bennett, commander of the Resolute, and Ambassador Henry Walsh, Earth's representative to the Volante court. Both of them looked as confused as Daniel felt. "Do either of you know what this is about?" Daniel asked. Captain Bennett shook her head. She was a hard woman in her 50s, with gray hair cut short and a face that had seen too many bad situations. "I got the summons 10 minutes after you did." No explanation. Ambassador Walsh was sweating. He was a thin man with nervous hands and a talent for saying the right thing at the right time. Right now, he had nothing to say. "This is unprecedented," he muttered. "The Queen has never summoned anyone below ambassador rank. Never." The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Kethvara, the Volante homeworld. Daniel looked out the window and saw a planet that did not look real. The cities were made of crystal that caught the light of the twin suns and threw it back in 1,000 colors. Mountains floated in the sky, held up by technology or magic or something in between. Rivers of liquid silver wound through valleys of purple vegetation. Humanity had been in space for less than 200 years. The Volante had been building empires before humans had discovered fire. The royal palace rose from the center of the capital city, like a frozen explosion. It was a structure of living crystal, constantly shifting and singing with frequencies that Daniel could feel in his bones. As they landed and walked through its gates, Daniel realized that every surface was covered in images and words in the Volante language. History, he guessed. Thousands of years of it, carved into the walls. The throne room was larger than a football field. Volante nobles filled the space, hundreds of them, standing in perfect rows according to rank and family. They turned to watch as Daniel and his companions were escorted forward. Their black eyes followed him, and he could feel their judgment like a physical weight at the far end of the room. On a throne that seemed to be made of solidified light sat Queen Sivalith Kamora. She was ancient. Daniel did not know how old, but he could feel it. She had the same silver skin and 4 arms as her people, but there was something different about her. something that made the air around her feel heavy with power and time. Her eyes were not just black. They were deep. Looking into them felt like looking into a hole that went down forever. "Daniel Harper of Earth," she said. Her voice was calm, but it filled the entire room without effort. "Step forward." Daniel walked forward alone. He could feel Captain Bennett wanting to follow him, but the guards held her back. He stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the Queen. "You have been watched," the Queen said. "For 3 weeks, your vessel arrived in our space. You have been observed. Your actions have been recorded. Your character has been assessed." Daniel did not know what to say, so he said nothing. "2 weeks ago, there was an incident aboard your ship. A reactor malfunction. The records show that you entered the affected chamber and manually sealed a breach in the containment system. The radiation levels in that chamber should have killed you. You completed your task and walked out." Daniel remembered that day. He remembered the alarms, the heat, the way his skin had felt like it was burning from the inside. He remembered thinking that he was probably going to die, and then deciding that he was going to finish the job anyway. "I was just doing my work," he said. "Yes." The Queen leaned forward slightly. "That is precisely why you have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" The Queen did not smile. Daniel was not sure Volanthi could smile. But something in her expression shifted, and the room grew even more silent than before. "You will become the mate of my daughter, Princess Alendra. You will bond with the royal bloodline and seal an alliance between your species and the Volanthi Empire." The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel felt his brain try to process the words and fail completely. Behind him, he heard Ambassador Walsh make a small choking sound. "I'm sorry," Daniel said slowly. "Did you just say I'm going to marry your daughter?" "I did not say marry. I said mate. The bonding ceremony is different from your human customs, but the result is the same. You will be joined to Alindra, and through that joining, humanity will be joined to us. And if I refuse..." The Queen's black eyes seemed to grow darker. "Then there is no reason for the Volanthi Empire to continue relations with Earth. Your people will be alone in a galaxy that contains things far worse than us. You have enemies you have not yet met, Daniel Harper. Without our protection, your species will not survive the century." Daniel stood very still. The weight of the moment pressed down on him from all sides. "So this isn't a request," he said. "No, it is not." Ambassador Walsh stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Your Majesty, surely we can discuss this. There are protocols, negotiations. There is nothing to negotiate." The Queen did not even look at him. "The decision has been made. Daniel Harper will be escorted to private chambers in the palace. He has 1 night to prepare himself." She finally looked back at Daniel, and her voice softened just slightly. "Steel your heart, human. Tomorrow you will meet your future." The guards closed around Daniel before he could respond. As they led him away from the throne room, away from his captain and his ambassador and everything familiar, Daniel Harper realized that his life had just changed forever. He did not sleep that night. A month passed, and Daniel Harper began to understand the Volanthi. They were not cold, as he had first thought. They were old. Their civilization had existed for so long that they had learned to hide their emotions behind walls of ritual and tradition. Every gesture had meaning. Every word was chosen with care. They had survived for thousands of years by being careful, by being patient, by never showing weakness to their enemies. Humans, Daniel realized, probably looked like children to them. Loud, messy, unpredictable children who had somehow stumbled into the stars without killing themselves first. Alindra taught him these things during their daily meetings. The trials had ended, and now they were expected to spend time together, learning about each other before the bonding ceremony. At first, these meetings had been awkward and silent. But slowly, carefully, They had begun to talk. My people have fought 17 major wars in our history, Alindra told him one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. Each one lasted centuries. Each one cost millions of lives. We learned that survival requires discipline. It requires control. Emotions are dangerous because they lead to mistakes, and mistakes in war lead to extinction. Daniel nodded slowly. On Earth, we've had hundreds of wars. Maybe thousands, depending on how you count. Most of them lasted years, not centuries. Some only lasted days. That seems chaotic. It was. It is. Daniel shrugged. But we're still here. Maybe there's something to be said for chaos. Alindra made a sound that might have been a laugh. Daniel was not sure. He was still learning to read Volanti expressions. You are strange, Daniel Harper, she said. My mother chose well, I think, though I did not believe it at first. And now, she did not answer directly. Instead, she told him about her own life. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, third in line for the throne. She had never expected to rule. She had wanted to serve in the military, to prove herself through battle and strategy. The idea of being married off for political purposes had filled her with anger. I thought you were an insult, she admitted. A short-lived alien with no power and no status. I thought my mother was punishing me for something. What changed your mind? Alindra stopped walking and looked at him. Her forearms were folded. In a pattern that Daniel had learned, meant she was thinking carefully about what to say. You did not break, she said simply. Everyone expected you to break. I expected you to break, but you did not. And that made me curious. Daniel smiled. Curiosity is a start, I guess. But not everyone was curious about Daniel Harper. Some were angry. Lord Kevin Verschel was one of the most powerful nobles in the Volanti Empire. He commanded 3 fleets and controlled the military forces of an entire sector. He was old even by Volanti standards, and he believed in the old ways. The pure ways. The ways that said the Volanti were the greatest species in the galaxy, and everyone else was beneath them. The idea of a human joining the royal bloodline made him sick. Daniel first met Kevin at a formal dinner 2 weeks after the trials ended. The Lord was huge, even for a Volanti. 8 feet tall, with scars covering his silver skin and eyes that burned with cold hatred. He looked at Daniel the way a predator looks at prey. So this is the human, Kevin said, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is the creature the Queen has chosen to pollute our royal blood. The room went silent. Daniel felt every eye turned toward him. I am Daniel Harper, he said calmly. It's nice to meet you, Lord Kevin. Kevin's lip curled in disgust. You should not be here, human. You should not be allowed to breathe the same air as the princess. Your presence is an insult to everything our empire represents. Daniel wanted to respond. He wanted to defend himself. But Alindra stepped forward first, her voice sharp as a blade. Lord Kevin, this human has passed the trials that you yourself designed centuries ago. He has earned his place. Perhaps you should focus on your own honor rather than questioning my mother's judgment. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Kevin stared at Alindra for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Later that night, Alindra warned Daniel to be careful. Kevin has many allies, she said. He believes my mother has grown weak. He will look for any opportunity to prove his point. And you are an easy target. Daniel nodded. I'll watch my back. But even watching his back was not enough. 2 weeks later, Daniel was invited to join a formal hunt in the crystal forests outside the capital. It was a tradition, a way for nobles to display their skill and courage. Daniel knew he was being tested again, but he also knew he could not refuse without looking like a coward. The hunt went wrong, almost. Immediately, Daniel was separated from his escorts within the first hour. His guide claimed they had taken a wrong turn, then disappeared into the forest. Daniel found himself alone in a maze of crystal trees that reflected his image back at him from every angle. Then the assassins came. There were 3 of them. Valanthe warriors in dark armor, moving through the forest like shadows. They did not speak. They did not give him a chance to surrender. They simply attacked. Daniel was not a soldier. He had served in Earth's military years ago, but he had been an engineer, not a fighter. He knew the basics of combat, but the basics were not enough. Against 3 trained killers who were faster and stronger than him. The first one almost killed him in the opening seconds. Daniel barely dodged a blade that would have taken his head off. He stumbled backward, crashed into a crystal tree, and felt blood run down his face from a cut on his forehead. The second assassin came at him from the side. Daniel grabbed a fallen branch and swung it wildly. It connected with the assassin's arm, but the Valanthe barely seemed to notice. He grabbed Daniel by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Daniel could not breathe. His vision was going dark. He could see the third assassin approaching with a knife, ready to finish the job. So Daniel stopped thinking and started surviving. He drove his thumb into the assassin's eye. The Valanthe screamed and dropped him. Daniel hit the ground, rolled, and came up with a rock in his hand. He smashed it into the knee of the third assassin, heard something crack, and watched the killer stumble. The first assassin was on him again. Daniel ducked under a sword swing and threw himself at a cluster of crystal trees. He remembered something Alindra had told him about the forests. The trees were not just beautiful. They were unstable. The right impact could cause them to shatter. Daniel hit the base of the largest tree with his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, but the tree cracked. Then it fell, and 2 more fell. With it, crashing down onto the first and third assassins in an avalanche of crystal. The second assassin, the one whose eye Daniel had wounded, came at him with a roar of rage. Daniel saw the knife in his hand and knew he was too slow to dodge it. So he did not dodge. He stepped forward instead. The knife went into his side, but his hands closed around the assassin's throat. They fell together, and Daniel held on. He held on even as the knife twisted in his body. He held on until the assassin stopped moving. When Alindra found him, Daniel was sitting against a crystal tree, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. His clothes were soaked with blood. His hands were shaking, but he was alive. "They tried to kill me," he said simply. Alindra looked at the 3 bodies. Her black eyes were wide. "You killed them," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You killed 3 Valanthe warriors, alone." Daniel coughed, and it hurt. "I'm stubborn like that." The investigation revealed what Daniel already knew. Lord Caven had ordered the assassination, but the Queen could not move against him directly. His military support was too strong. His allies were too powerful. Acting against him would risk civil war. The Queen came to see Daniel in the medical bay. She stood over his bed and looked down at him with those ancient, endless eyes. "You have a choice," she said. "You can leave now, with honor intact. I will arrange for your return to Earth. You have done nothing wrong, and no one will blame you for choosing safety." Daniel thought about it. He thought about Earth, about the Resolute, about the life he had left behind. "And if I stay, and more enemies will come. Kevin will not stop. He cannot afford to stop. You have embarrassed him, and embarrassment demands blood." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his decision was made. "Running away has never solved anything," he said. "I'm staying." The Queen studied him for a long time, and for just a moment, Daniel thought he saw something like respect in her ancient face. "Very well," she said. "Then we will prepare for what comes next." The room they gave Daniel was larger than his entire apartment back on Earth. The walls were made of that same living crystal, and they changed color slowly as the hours passed. There was a bed that was too big for him, furniture that was not designed for human bodies, and a window that looked out over a city of impossible beauty. Daniel did not notice any of it. He spent the night sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. At some point, his communicator buzzed. He answered it and heard Captain Bennett's voice, tight with controlled anger. "I just got off a call with Earth Command," she said. "They've been informed of the situation." And? There was a pause. A long one. "They want you to comply, Daniel. The Alliance is too important. The Volanthi have technology we need. They have information about threats we don't even know about yet. If this falls apart because one engineer refused to play along..." She stopped herself. "I'm sorry. I fought for you. I told them this was wrong. But the decision came from the top." Daniel closed his eyes. He had expected this. That did not make it hurt less. "So I'm being sold," he said quietly. "That's not..." Bennett started, then stopped. "I don't know what to tell you, Daniel. I don't have any good answers." "It's okay, Captain. It's not your fault. For what it's worth, I think you're one of the best people I've ever served with. Whatever happens, remember that." The line went dead. Daniel sat in the darkness for a long time. After that, morning came with the sound of chimes that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A servant arrived with food that Daniel did not recognize and clothes that were clearly not meant for humans. He ate what he could and dressed in what fit. Then the guards came and took him to the palace gardens. The gardens were not like anything on Earth. The plants were tall and thin, with leaves that sang when the wind touched them. Flowers bloomed in colors that Daniel had no names for. Paths made of crushed gems wound through groves of trees that grew in spirals toward the sky. And there, standing beside a fountain that poured liquid light instead of water, was Princess Alindra. Daniel stopped walking and just looked at her. She was tall, even for a Volanthi. Nearly 7 feet, with the same silver skin as her mother, but somehow brighter, like metal that had just been polished. She had 4 arms like all her people, and each one was long and elegant, moving with a grace that made Daniel feel clumsy just watching. Her eyes were the deepest black he had ever seen, and her face was beautiful in a way that was completely alien. She looked at Daniel the way someone might look at a bug that had crawled onto their dinner plate. "So," she said. Her voice was cold. "This is the human." Daniel walked forward until he was standing a few feet away from her. He had to look up to meet her eyes. "That's me." Alindra circled him slowly, her forearms clasped behind her back. "I was told you were special. I was told you had proven yourself worthy of attention." She stopped in front of him and leaned down slightly. "I see nothing special. I see a small, soft creature with thin skin and dull eyes. Your species lives for less than a century. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no abilities of note. You are fragile." Daniel felt something shift inside him. He had been pushed around, ordered around, treated like property for the past day. He was tired. He was angry. And he was done being quiet about it. "You're right," he said calmly. "Humans are fragile. We break easily. We get sick. We die young compared to you." He paused. "But we're still here." Alindra's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that my species has been almost wiped out 6 times in our history. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Plagues that killed half of us. Wars where we did our best to destroy ourselves. Our own sun started becoming unstable, and we had to figure out how to survive that too." Daniel met her eyes without flinching. "Fragile things don't survive what we've survived. Fragile things don't crawl out of the dark over and over again and keep going. You can call us whatever you want, princess, but don't make the mistake of thinking we're weak." The garden was silent except for the singing of the leaves. Alindra stared at Daniel for a long moment. Her expression did not change, but something flickered in those black eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or curiosity. We shall see, she said finally. The trials begin today. The trials were designed to break him. Daniel understood that from the first moment. They put him in combat simulations against Volanti warriors. He lost. Of course he lost. The Volanti were faster, stronger, and had 2 more arms than he did. But every time they knocked him down, he got back up. Every time they hit him, he came back for more. By the end of the first day, his body was covered in bruises, and his muscles screamed with pain. But he had not quit. They gave him logic puzzles that were designed for minds that thought in ways humans did not. Daniel could not solve them the way the Volanti expected. So he solved them differently. He found shortcuts. He broke the rules in ways the judges had never seen before. He did not always get the right answer, but he always found an answer. They tested his endurance. They made him run until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. They exposed him to temperatures that made his body shake and his teeth chatter. They kept him awake for days at a time and watched to see when he would collapse. Daniel did not collapse. He bent, he suffered, but he did not break. On the 5th day of trials, they gave him a ceremonial drink. It was part of some ancient ritual, something that honored the ancestors of the Volanti royal family. Daniel did not know what was in it. He drank it anyway, because refusing would have been seen as an insult. The pain hit him 30 seconds later. It felt like his insides were on fire. The drink was not poison, exactly, but it contained something that human bodies could not handle. His stomach cramped. His vision blurred. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the ceremonial cup. The Volanti watching him expected him to fall. They expected him to cry out for help, to beg for treatment, to show them the weakness they were certain all humans had. Daniel finished the ritual. He spoke the words he had been taught to speak. He bowed to the queen. Then he walked, slowly and steadily, out of the ceremonial hall. He walked down the corridor. He walked into the medical bay, sat down on a table, and calmly told the physicians that he had been poisoned and would appreciate some help. Then he passed out. When he woke up, Alendra was sitting beside his bed. She was alone, which surprised him. The princess was always surrounded by servants and guards. But here she was, sitting in a simple chair, watching him with those impossible eyes. "You should have died," she said. "The physicians say the toxin levels in your blood should have stopped your heart." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Sorry to disappoint. You did not call for help. You did not forfeit the ritual. You finished it, walked out under your own power, and then asked for assistance as if you were reporting a minor inconvenience." She tilted her head slightly, stunning him. Why? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to death in a factory and never complained. He thought about his grandmother, who had raised 6 children alone during the worst years of the water wars. He thought about every human who had ever faced something terrible and refused to give in. "Where I come from," he said, "you don't quit just because something hurts." Alendra was silent for a long time. Then she stood up and walked toward the door. She paused there, not looking back. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "I was wrong about your species." Then she was gone. And Daniel was left alone with the beeping of medical machines and the strange feeling that something important had just changed. The story spread across the empire like fire. A human, alone and unarmed, had killed 3 Volanti assassins in the Crystal Forests. The details changed depending on who was telling the tale. Some said he had fought 10 warriors. Some said he had torn them apart with his bare hands. Some said he had used dark human magic that no one understood. The truth was simpler and more impressive. Daniel Harper had refused to die. In the weeks that followed, Daniel noticed a change in how the Volanti treated him. The contempt was still there in some eyes, but it was mixed now with something else. Caution, curiosity, and in a few cases, something that looked almost like respect. "They do not know what to make of you," Alindra told him one evening. They were sitting in her private chambers, sharing a meal of foods that Daniel still could not identify. "You do not fit their understanding of humans. You are not supposed to be able to do what you did." Daniel shrugged. "I got lucky. And desperate. Mostly desperate. That is not what they see." Alindra leaned forward, her forearms resting on the table. "They see a creature who was outmatched in every way and still won. They see something they cannot explain. And the Volanti do not like things they cannot explain." "What do you see?" Alindra was quiet for a moment. Her black eyes studied his face in a way that made Daniel feel like she was looking straight through him. "I see someone who does not know how to give up," she said finally. "I see someone who fights not because he thinks he will win, but because he does not know how to do anything else." Daniel smiled. "That's either a compliment or an insult." "I can't tell. It is an observation." Alindra's voice softened slightly. "My people value strength. We always have. But we have forgotten that strength takes many forms. You have reminded us of that." Their relationship had changed since the forest. Daniel could feel it. The walls between them were coming down, slowly but surely. Alindra no longer spoke to him like he was beneath her. She spoke to him like an equal. And Daniel found himself looking forward to their time together in a way that surprised him. One night, she told him the truth about her feelings. "I did not want this arrangement," she admitted. "I hated it. I had plans for my life. I was going to earn my place through service, through battle, through merit. Being given to a human for political reasons felt like a punishment." Daniel nodded. "I understand. I didn't choose this either. I know. That is what made it worse, somehow. Knowing that we were both trapped in something neither of us wanted." She paused. "But I have learned something in these weeks with you. Meaning can be found even in unchosen paths. Perhaps especially in unchosen paths." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. It was a risk. Physical contact meant different things in Volanti culture. But Alindra did not pull away. She let his small, soft human fingers rest against her silver palm. "We can make something good out of this," he said. "If we want to." "Yes," she said quietly. "I believe we can." But their enemies were not finished. The attack came during a formal gathering of the noble houses. One of Alindra's rivals, a cousin named Lady Thesa, stood before the assembly and made an accusation. "The princess has been corrupted," Thesa declared. "She defends the human. She speaks of him as an equal. She has forgotten her place and her duty to our people." The chamber erupted in whispers. Daniel stood beside Alindra, watching the politics play out around him. He could see Lord Caven in the crowd, his scarred face twisted in a satisfied smile. This was his doing. Another attack, but one that Daniel could not fight with his fists. Alindra stepped forward. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I have forgotten nothing," she said. "I am the daughter of Queen Sivalith. I know my place. I know my duty. And I know that our empire has survived because we recognize strength where we find it." She turned and looked directly at Daniel. "This human came to us as a stranger. He was tested in ways that would have broken most of our own warriors. He survived trials that were designed to destroy him. He killed 3 trained assassins who ambushed him in the forest." She looked back at Thesa. "He has shown more courage than half the nobles in this chamber. If defending him makes me corrupted, then I embrace my corruption." The room was silent. Daniel could feel the weight of every eye on him. Thesa recovered quickly. "Pretty words. But words do not change facts. The human is weak. He is inferior. And the princess's defense of him proves that she is not fit for her position." Daniel had heard enough. He stepped forward before Alindra could respond. Lady Thesa, he said calmly, I've only been here a couple of months, so maybe I don't understand how things work. But where I come from, when someone questions your fitness, they usually have to prove they're better. So I'm asking you, directly, are you willing to prove it? Or do you just talk? The crowd gasped. Daniel had just challenged a Volanti noble to prove her superiority. In Volanti culture, such challenges were taken seriously. They could not be ignored. Thesa's face twisted with rage. But before she could respond, a new voice filled the chamber. An interesting question. Lord Kevin walked forward from the crowd. He was massive, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. He stopped a few feet from Daniel and looked down at him with those burning eyes. The human speaks of proving fitness, Kevin said. Very well. I will give him the opportunity he asks for. He smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. I invoke the Kethvalen, the duel of truth. The human will face me in single combat to the death. If he wins, his place in our empire will be secured forever. If he loses, he shrugged his massive shoulders. Then the problem solves itself. The crowd erupted in chaos. The Kethvalan was an ancient ritual, almost never used in modern times. It was brutal, final, and completely legal. Once invoked, it could not be refused without bringing eternal shame upon the person who backed down. Captain Bennett pushed through the crowd to reach Daniel's side. You can't accept this, she said urgently. They'll kill you. He's been fighting for centuries. You're an engineer. Ambassador Walsh was sweating heavily. Your Majesty, he called out to the Queen. Surely there must be another way. This is barbaric. But the Queen said nothing. Her ancient eyes watched the scene with an expression Daniel could not read. Daniel looked up at Kevin. The Volanti Lord was twice his size. He had weapons built into his body. He had experience that Daniel could not even imagine. By every measure, this fight was impossible. I accept, Daniel said. The room went silent again. Kevin's smile widened. Brave, he said. Stupid, but brave. The duel will take place in 3 days. He turned and walked away. The crowd parted for him like water before a ship. That night, Alindra came to Daniel's chambers. Her face was filled with an emotion he had never seen there before. Fear. You should not have done that, she said. You should have found another way. Kevin is the greatest warrior in the Empire. He has killed thousands. You cannot defeat him. Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the alien stars. Maybe not, he admitted. But I couldn't let him win without a fight. And I couldn't let you face your enemies alone. Alindra crossed the room and stood beside him. After a moment, she placed all 4 of her hands on his shoulders, turning him to face her. I do not want you to die, she said quietly. I thought I did not care what happened to you. I was wrong. Daniel reached up and touched her face. Her silver skin was cool beneath his fingers. I don't plan on dying, he said. I've got too much to live for now. Alindra leaned down and rested her forehead against his. It was a gesture of intimacy that Daniel had never seen between Volanti before. Then fight, she whispered. Fight the way only humans know how. And come back to me. Daniel closed his eyes. In 3 days, he would face the greatest warrior in the Empire. He had no idea how he was going to win. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to quit. The arena was older than human civilization. It had been carved into the heart of the capital city thousands of years ago. A great bowl of stone and crystal, where the Volanti had settled disputes since before they reached the stars. The seats rose in endless tiers, filled with thousands of silver-skinned spectators who had come to witness history. A human was about to fight a Volanti lord to the death. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Daniel Harper stood at one end of the arena floor, wearing simple combat clothes that the Volante had provided. He had refused armor. It would have been useless anyway. He carried a single blade, a weapon designed for Volante hands, but modified for his own. It felt clumsy and too heavy, but it was all he had. At the other end of the arena stood Lord Kevin. VOR single quotes SAL. The Volante Lord was a mountain of muscle and hatred. His body was covered in the scars of 1,000 battles. He carried a sword that crackled with energy, capable of cutting through metal as easily as flesh. His forearms were weapons in themselves, and his eyes burned with the certainty of victory. The Queen sat in the royal box above the arena, flanked by her daughters. Alindra's face was pale, her hands gripping the railing so tightly that the crystal cracked beneath her fingers. Captain Bennett and Ambassador Walsh were somewhere in the crowd, watching helplessly. A horn sounded, deep and long. The duel had begun. Kevin moved first. He crossed the arena floor in 3 massive strides, his sword sweeping through the air in an arc that would have cut Daniel in half. Daniel threw himself to the side, hit the ground, and rolled. The blade passed so close to his face that he could feel the heat of its energy. He barely had time to get back to his feet before Kevin was on him again. The Volante Lord was fast, impossibly fast for his size. His forearms attacked in combinations that Daniel could barely see, let alone block. A fist connected with Daniel's chest and sent him flying backward. He crashed into the arena wall and felt something crack in his ribs. The crowd roared. Some cheered for Kevin. Others watched in hungry silence, waiting to see the human die. Daniel pushed himself up from the ground. Blood was running from his nose and his side. Every breath hurt. But he got up. Kevin paused, his head tilted in confusion. "You should stay down, human. It will be easier that way." Daniel spat blood onto the arena floor. "Where's the fun in that?" He charged forward. It was a stupid move. Every instinct told him to stay back, to play defensive, to survive as long as possible. But Daniel had learned something about Volante psychology in his time among them. They expected prey to run. They were built to chase. So he did the opposite. His attack surprised Kevin for just a moment. Daniel's blade caught the Lord's leg, drawing a thin line of silver blood. It was barely a scratch, but it was the first wound anyone had given Kevin in decades. The crowd gasped. Kevin's surprise turned to rage. He attacked with renewed fury, his blade moving so fast it seemed to split into multiple weapons at once. Daniel blocked what he could and dodged what he could not. Each impact sent shocks of pain through his arms. Each near miss left new cuts on his body. The minutes stretched into an hour. The hour stretched into 2. The arena had grown quiet. The spectators watched in disbelief as the impossible continued to unfold. Daniel Harper, a weak human with no special powers and no centuries of training, refused to fall. Kevin was tiring. Daniel could see it. The Volante Lord had expected a quick execution, not a marathon. His movements were becoming slower, less precise. His breath was coming harder. He was not used to opponents who lasted this long. Daniel was in worse shape. His body was covered in wounds. He could barely lift his sword. He could barely see through the blood and sweat in his eyes. Everything hurt in ways he had not known were possible. But he was still standing. "Why won't you die?" Kevin snarled. There was something new in his voice now. Something that sounded almost like fear. "What are you?" Daniel smiled through bloody teeth. "I'm human." He attacked again. The fight became something beyond skill or strength. It became a test of will. Daniel knew he could not overpower Kevin. He knew he could not outfight him, but he could outlast him. He could keep moving, keep attacking, keep getting up no matter how many times he was knocked down. and slowly, impossibly, Kevin began to crack. The Volante Lord made a mistake. After 3 hours of combat, after taking dozens of small wounds that he had expected to deliver in the first minute, his concentration slipped. He overextended on a thrust, leaving his side exposed for just a fraction of a second. Daniel moved without thinking. His blade found the gap in Kevin's guard and plunged into his side, sliding between ribs and into something vital. Kevin roared in pain and staggered backward. He fell to his knees, his massive body shaking with shock and blood loss. Daniel stood over him, his sword raised for the killing blow. The arena was completely silent. Thousands of Volante held their breath. The queen leaned forward in her seat. Alindra's hands were pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her silver face. Daniel looked down at Kevin, the lord who had wanted him dead, the warrior who had sent assassins to kill him in the forest, the enemy who had done everything possible to destroy him. He lowered his sword. "I didn't come here to prove that humans are killers," Daniel said. His voice was quiet, but in the silence of the arena, everyone heard it. "I came here to prove that we're survivors. And survivors don't need to destroy everyone who opposes them." He stepped back, letting his sword fall to the ground. "I spare your life, Lord Kevin. Not because you deserve it, but because mercy is what separates us from the monsters." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the queen rose to her feet. "The duel is concluded," she announced. Her voice carried across the arena like thunder. "Daniel Harper is the victor." The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some screamed in disbelief. Some simply sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. They surrounded Daniel and Kevin both, working to stop the bleeding and stabilize their wounds. Daniel felt hands lifting him, carrying him away from the arena. His vision was fading, his strength finally giving out. But before the darkness took him, he saw Alindra running toward him. He saw her silver face, beautiful and fierce and filled with an emotion. He had never expected to see their pride, and something more. He smiled as consciousness slipped away. When Daniel woke up, he was in the medical bay again. It was becoming a familiar place. Alindra was beside his bed, all 4 of her hands wrapped around his too. She looked exhausted, like she had not slept in days. But when she saw his eyes open, her face lit up with relief. "You're alive," she said. The physicians said it was impossible. They said no human body could have survived what you endured. But you're alive. Daniel managed a weak laugh. "I'm stubborn like that." Alindra leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. "You are the most impossible creature I have ever met, Daniel Harper. You were supposed to be weak. You were supposed to be inferior. But you defeated the greatest warrior in the Empire through sheer refusal to surrender. Does that mean I passed the final test?" Alindra laughed. It was a beautiful sound, one that Daniel had never heard from her before. "You passed every test. You have proven yourself beyond any doubt. The alliance between our peoples is sealed, and—" She paused, her black eyes meeting his. "And I have found something I never expected to find." "What's that?" "A partner. An equal. Someone I choose to stand beside, not because I was commanded to, but because I want to." Daniel squeezed her hands as tightly as his wounded body would allow. "I want that too." The queen arrived later that day. She stood at the foot of Daniel's bed and studied him with those ancient, endless eyes. "You have surprised me, Daniel Harper," she said. "I have lived for thousands of years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have met countless species from countless worlds. But I have never seen anything quite like you." "I'm just one human," Daniel said. "Nothing special. That is where you are wrong." The queen's voice was gentle, almost warm. You are everything that makes your species dangerous. Not your technology. Not your numbers. Your spirit. Your refusal to accept defeat. Your ability to find strength in weakness and hope in despair. She turned and walked toward the door, then paused. I made the right choice, she said. My daughter has found her match. And the Volanthi Empire has found something even more valuable. An ally worthy of respect. She left, and Daniel was alone with Alindra once more. 3 months later, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of the capital city. The Resolute had departed for Earth, carrying news of the Alliance and the story of what had happened. He had chosen to stay behind. Alindra joined him, her 4 arms wrapping around him from behind. Do you regret it? She asked. Leaving your people? Staying here? Daniel considered the question. He thought about Earth, about the life he had left behind. He thought about everything he had lost and everything he had gained. No, he said finally. I found something worth staying for. Alindra rested her chin on top of his head. My mother says the other species are watching us now. Watching to see what happens when humans and Volanthi work together. Let them watch. Daniel smiled. We'll show them something they've never seen before. Below them, the city sang with 1,000 colors as the twin suns set.